Okay, so what we keep hearing on Twitter and what we keep hearing throughout in the coverage of this particular story is community, community, community. Where are they? What is their role? Todd Swanstrom is with the UMSL Public Policy Research Center. You've been here before, so we've asked you back. Natalie Self is with Beyond Housing, doing a lot of work in a lot of communities. Community, community, community. What are we, let me ask this, what are we missing in this at this point? I mean, what do we need to know about this project and these? I don't think there's a single community in the regeneration area. I think there's a number of communities. What do we need to know about that?
Well, I think this is a big project and kind of can blot out a lot of what's happening on the ground. You know, what's happening in the St. Louis region is there are revitalization efforts bubbling up all over St. Louis City and county and across the region. And I think, you know, any project like this has to build on what's there. It's called asset-based community development, ABCD, right, Natalie?
Absolutely.
And, you know, you work with what's there and
Is
you
that what
build
people
up
call an organic sort of project that comes out of the community?
I mean, I don't want to romanticize bottom up. You need the top, you need the grass tops as well as the grass roots, right? But you have to work with community, and it's painstaking to build from the bottom. And I think there's a lot of good things happening in the region.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, what's interesting about the region in particular with this project is that community development is so diverse in St. Louis. This is almost sort of on one end of a spectrum. And then on the other end of a spectrum, both in terms of size of development, but also models might be organizations like Beyond Housing. So we follow a process called Ask, Align, and Act. And so similar to what some of the other panelists were saying in the previous session, we start by asking. We go into places where we're invited, and so our model is just very different.
But you're not a developer, although you do some development. I mean, you've built some stuff.
Well,
We are
Yeah.
a nonprofit organization that does development. We started 40 years ago with housing and affordable housing, and have moved to larger scale commercial development, affordable grocery stores, full service banks. We're actually about to break ground on
But do you sneak around doing it?
No, well, that's not our model.
Okay.
We start with the community and we ask them what they want to see.
Right.
Not only that, but I think it's interesting in the case of Beyond Housing and the 24-1 initiative, and they're doing work at
In the Normandy, Pagedale?
Pagedale area, doing work at the Rock Road TOD station. I've been told they're not going to use eminent domain, and they're just facing the fact that they might have to spend a little bit more to purchase property when people don't want to sell it at a certain point in time. So they're just, in order to really be transparent and to be honest with the community, they're going to have to spend more money. Now, in some ways that kind of rubs me the wrong way, but on the other hand, that shows that what's important is that they be upfront with the community from the get-go. And the other thing is, you know, real community participation means not that you bring the plan to the community and say, what do you think? You sit down with the community and say, what's on your mind? What are you thinking about for this community first to set the agenda?
But when you have something this big, and this was something we were talking about just a little bit ago, do you feel like the pot is now in somebody else's, you know, place, that the ability to do, for other organizations to do developments in other areas is going to be lessened, is it going to be hurt? Or is this not that kind of a, you know, game? Is there plenty for everybody to do whatever they want to do?
As an organization, I mean, we feel strongly that there are assets in every community. There's always opportunity. You have to be creative sometimes. You certainly have to be respectful. So I personally would feel like that may not be a conversation I would agree with, but you know, from a scholarly point of view, Todd, I don't know where you
stand. Well, I mean, I agree with Natalie. I mean, I think it's not a zero-sum game. I mean, I'd like to see Paul McKee succeed. I mean, I'm very much supportive of what's going to happen. And I think if he succeeds, we're all going to do better.
Well, the talk is right, because he's not just talking about building some houses. He's also talking about building a grocery store. He's talking about creating jobs. There's some promises about who gets those jobs. So it's economic, it's residential, it's environmental.
Well, that shows you, I think, what really is at stake here, especially when you're working in a community that has the disadvantages that parts of the north side have, the disinvestment, loss of population. You can't just do one thing. You've got to do all those things, and so it's very, very complicated. When we work in other communities, I work with the Community Builders Network. It's a coalition of about 30 community development groups on the ground. Some of them are working in communities where really they just need a grocery store. I mean, that's the problem, right? They've got other things, you know. But here in this case, you've got to do all these things, and so I think people have to be patient. I think they have to understand that this is painstaking. You have to weave the fabric together to make great cities. You can't just come in and build a building and think that that's going to do the job.
Some of the comments have been, I think, why is this guy getting so much guff for coming in and trying to do something? Now, I know there are other organizations that are doing things in there, but why is he getting this much for trying to do something? When you think back, for example, with remember the Team 4 plan, right? The triage. Well, we won't put money in those neighborhoods because they're not. We can't save them, so we'll put money in the West End. And people were outraged. Now they're outraged because somebody says, "I want to put money into this neighborhood."
Well, I think he's filling a gap here, a vacuum here, right? I mean, if you look at, there's a redevelopment local land bank in the city of St. Louis, which has accumulated properties. It's one of the first land banks in the United States. It was a real step forward when it was created, but it has no funds to really plan and really do it, implement it. Instead, it tries to sell individual properties.
Right.
So Paul McKee, and I think he's very sincere, is trying to step into that gap, but he's stepping into a really big, difficult situation, right? And it's a difficult situation also because he's a private developer. It's not a public. I mean, in the case of Beyond Housing, they're working with Pagedale. They're a nonprofit. I mean, there's a little. It's a little easier. It's something you can get your hands around.
And yet, the toughest stories, the harshest memories are the public projects. Mill Creek,
That's for sure.
Pruitt-Igoe.
That's for sure.
And when
Well,
St. Louis thought big and thought big now, so here's a private, although there's public funding in it.
Well,
here's a private developer, and he's not.
I think
What's the difference?
I want to encourage us to continue to think big. It's, for me, not about what the project looks like, it's about how we approach the project. And so with Beyond Housing and 20-for-1, we have 24 municipalities that are working together. That's approximately 40,000 residents. That's a big project. For us, what's been successful is that we were very intentional with our process. Again, we asked people what they wanted to see, and we focused on quick wins. And I think organizations like Paul McKee's would benefit from some quick wins on the community development side.
That's right.